What if everything you've been told about aging, stress, and your limitations is a lie? Imagine a lost Egyptian code that reveals your body and mind can regenerate, your perception of time can bend, and hidden dimensions of consciousness can be unlocked all through practices anyone can do. The secrets were hidden for millennia. But now, the knowledge to reverse aging, restore vitality, and access your full potential is finally within reach. Are you ready to reclaim the ancient wisdom that can transform your life? For as long as humans have looked up at the night sky and wondered why reality feels deeper than what we can touch, names like Thoth drift through our history like echoes from a forgotten conversation. Not as living gods, not as literal beings carved into stone, but as vessels of something harder to describe. Our earliest attempts to understand the mind, the universe, and the invisible boundaries between what we perceive and what we sense is there but cannot yet explain. When people speak of Thoth, the Egyptian keeper of knowledge and measurement, they often imagine myths of divine scribes in cosmic libraries. But behind the symbols and the glitter of legend, there was a very human impulse to decode reality itself. And this is where the idea of the Emerald Code begins, not as magic, not as a supernatural device, but as a metaphor for what the ancients understood about perception, cognition, and the hidden layers of the world. If you were standing inside one of the great Egyptian halls thousands of years ago, surrounded by the geometry of columns shaped like papyrus stems, you would immediately sense that these structures weren't made only to impress. They were engineered to guide attention, to create psychological effects, to alter perception. Ancient civilizations didn't have modern neuroscience, but they observed the mind more intimately than most of us do today. They noticed how the brain behaves under stillness, darkness, sustained focus, ritual, breath control, and rhythm. They saw how humans step into different states of consciousness, not by being mystical, but by being human. And they wrapped those observations in stories, symbols, and deities, because symbolism was their science before science existed. Thoth, in this context, wasn't simply a mythological scribe. He represented the part of the human mind that organizes reality, the capacity to understand patterns, encode memory, detect meaning, and navigate the unseen structure of the world. When we read about the emerald tablets supposedly written by him, shimmering with impossible green brilliance, we're really reading about humanity's attempt to articulate the inner architecture of consciousness. Of course, as physical objects, the tablets are more legend than artifact. But as ideas, they're powerful. The Emerald Code, as modern thinkers interpret it, isn't a literal instruction manual for bending reality. It's a poetic framework that hints at how perception shapes our experience of dimensions we normally don't notice. Dimensions that physics, neuroscience, and cognitive science now study with increasing seriousness. When people talk about hidden dimensions, they often imagine alternate universes or swirling cosmic portals. But hidden dimensions also exist in far more grounded ways within the limits of how our sensory systems and cognitive filters process the world. Right now, your eyes absorb only a small sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. You hear a narrow slice of possible vibrations. Your brain filters out most of what's happening around you. You live in a curated environment, constructed not by the world, but by your nervous system's interpretation of it. To ancient observers, this gap between the world as it is and the world as we perceive it was the gateway to mystery. To modern scientists, it's the foundation of cognitive science. The Emerald Code, framed scientifically, becomes a way of describing how the mind unlocks these layers, how it expands, recalibrates, and reorganizes itself to perceive what was always present but normally hidden behind mental noise, bias, and evolutionary shortcuts. There is no magic in this, only the mechanics of attention, memory, pattern recognition, and sensory integration. The ancients saw this long before neuroscience gave us vocabulary for it. It's no coincidence that almost every ancient temple includes chambers of controlled light, acoustics, and spatial compression. These were built environments designed to alter neural processing. Even today, we know that confined spaces, subtle echo patterns, and changes in light frequency affect the brain's thalamus and visual cortex, producing shifts in perception that can feel like stepping into another world. Imagine a priest or scholar entering a narrow tunnel, lit only by a faint torch, breathing slowly, hearing their footsteps echo just slightly off rhythm. Their heartbeat changes, their awareness sharpens. The brain enters a mode where it notices patterns normally ignored. These experiences later became described as entering other realms, but really they were entering deeper layers of their own cognitive architecture. This is where Thoth becomes symbolic, again, representing the cognitive functions that structure reality, organize perception, regulate attention, and decode information. The Emerald Code becomes a metaphor for how the human mind interfaces with complexity and extracts meaning from chaos. So when the ancients said Thoth could walk between worlds, they were describing the mind's ability to shift states between logic and intuition, language and image, conscious thought and subconscious insight. From a modern standpoint, this means accessing networks across the brain that don't normally synchronize. Neuroscience shows that profound insight often emerges when distant neural circuits suddenly communicate. The ancients articulated this through myth. We articulate it through functional MRI scans. Now, imagine a scribe in ancient Egypt sitting in front of a blank tablet, the flicker of a lamp casting shadows that dance like thoughts. He's not writing magic spells. He's documenting the laws of observation, pattern, and proportion, what we would eventually call mathematics, astronomy, and psychology. But to him, these weren't separate disciplines. They were one unified language, the language of the universe itself. He sees the way stars map themselves across the sky with precise repetition. He sees how human behavior repeats patterns, how conflict, ambition, love, fear, and insight follow cycles just as predictable. He sees how breath alters the mind, how ritual focuses it, how repetition engraves ideas deeper. All of this becomes part of what later cultures mythologize as Thoth's teachings. If you strip away the metaphors, what you're left with is an ancient investigation into the laws of cognition, how humans learn, remember, perceive, and make meaning. And this is exactly what modern psychology studies. Hidden dimensions, from this perspective, aren't exotic cosmic planes. They're layers of mental processing happening outside conscious awareness. They're the invisible frameworks your brain uses to shape your sense of time, identity, threat, possibility, and reality itself. The Emerald Code, interpreted scientifically, becomes a blueprint for accessing these layers, training the mind to notice what it usually filters out, strengthening the prefrontal cortex to focus without distraction, quieting the noise of the amygdala so perception becomes clearer, enhancing working memory so patterns emerge faster. When ancient texts speak of lifting the veil, they were describing the moment when you suddenly perceive a pattern that was always there but unnoticed. When they speak of unlocking portals, they were describing shifts in cognitive state, when the brain reorganizes information in a new structure. When they speak of speaking the language of the gods, they were talking about symbolic thinking, our uniquely human ability to encode abstract ideas into stories, mathematics, and art. From this angle, the Emerald Code isn't supernatural at all. It's the beginning of cognitive science expressed in mythic language. Thoth becomes the archetype of structured thought, pattern recognition, and reason, the very functions that allow humans to build civilizations, discover scientific laws, and expand the limits of understanding. But when you frame it this way, something interesting emerges. The myths were not wrong. They were metaphorical descriptions of processes we are just now learning to explain formally. The deeper you look at ancient mystery schools, the more this interpretation becomes clear. Their rituals trained focus, memory, and awareness. Their architecture manipulated sensory processing. Their symbols encoded complex ideas in compact, visual forms. Their myths carried generational knowledge about human cognition. And behind it all was the belief that reality wasn't limited to what the eyes see. They sensed additional layers, psychological, perceptual, symbolic, that shaped experience. Today, cognitive scientists agree. Reality is not the world as it is, but the brain's constructed model of it. To access more of reality, you don't travel elsewhere. You refine the model. This is the scientific doorway into hidden dimensions, not worlds outside yourself, but worlds inside your perceptual system that remain locked until you learn to interpret them. The Emerald Code becomes a metaphorical key, not a magical one. When we explore the idea of hidden dimensions through the lens of cognition, we begin to understand why ancient civilizations used symbolic forms instead of literal descriptions. The mind grasps metaphors more quickly than abstractions. A single symbol can carry layers of meaning that would take volumes of text to explain. The ancients might not have articulated neural pathways or cognitive filters, but they understood that the mind perceives reality in patterns. And so they encoded these patterns in stories about gods, sacred objects, and mystical codes. This wasn't superstition, it was pedagogy. Stories were tools for transmitting insights about human behavior, perception, and the nature of reality. Imagine an initiate stepping into a temple of learning, guided by elders who spoke in parables. He hears tales of Thoth and the Emerald Tablets, of hidden laws and cosmic principles. But beneath the narrative was a psychological purpose: to train the initiate, to think in analogies, to see beyond literal words, to recognize recurring patterns across nature, society, and the self. This method developed a flexible mind, capable of perceiving relationships that the average person overlooks. Modern cognitive science calls this capacity pattern abstraction, the ability to detect underlying structures that connect seemingly unrelated phenomena. It's one of the core mechanisms of intelligence. The Emerald Code, seen through this lens, becomes a structured way of training the mind to perceive such deeper relationships. It's a conceptual map, not an artifact. A metaphorical framework that points toward an enhanced cognitive state. And although it was never described in scientific language, its principles align closely with what neuroscience identifies as the integration of distributed neural networks, when the brain's analytical, intuitive, emotional, and sensory systems synchronize in a more unified way. This synchronization creates what many describe as heightened awareness or clarity, experiences that the ancients portrayed as glimpsing other realms. If you've ever had a moment where a problem suddenly made sense, not step by step, but all at once, you've experienced a small version of this. The brain reorganized information, and what was previously complex became immediately coherent. That moment feels like seeing into a hidden dimension, because you're accessing a pattern that was always present but invisible until your cognitive system aligned correctly. This alignment often feels almost mystical, even though it's grounded in neural dynamics. The ancient myths captured that feeling, translating it into narratives of divine wisdom, cosmic laws, and emerald inscriptions glowing with truth. As we peel back these metaphors, we see that the ancients were grappling with questions we still ask today. What is consciousness? Why do humans have self-awareness? How does perception shape our reality? And is there more to the world than what our senses reveal? Today, we approach these questions through neuroscience, physics, and psychology. But the core fascination remains the same. The Emerald Code becomes a poetic placeholder for the quest to understand the invisible architecture beneath experience. Consider how physics describes dimensions. We live in a three-dimensional space with a fourth dimension of time, but modern theories propose additional spatial dimensions curled into the fabric of reality, too small to detect directly, but influencing the behavior of particles. These dimensions are not mystical. They're mathematical. They shape the universe at a fundamental level, even if our senses cannot perceive them. The ancients didn't have equations to describe this, but they sensed that reality was layered, that what we perceive is not the full story. So, they created metaphors of veils, gates, and secret chambers. Now imagine combining this physical framework with a cognitive one. The brain constructs its model of reality using limited sensory inputs. It interprets patterns, predicts outcomes, filters information, and generates meaning. In this sense, your personal reality is a constructed dimension, one built by neural circuits interpreting external stimuli. And the way your brain constructs that dimension determines how you perceive the world. Two people can experience the same moment, yet live in entirely different internal dimensions because their cognitive frameworks differ. This is why ancient teachings often emphasized inner development before outer understanding. They believed that to see reality clearly, one must first refine perception. Modern psychology supports this idea. Cognitive biases, emotional states, and past experiences all shape interpretation. If you change these internal filters, the world seems to change with them. The Emerald Code symbolizes this internal recalibration, the process of refining perception so that hidden layers of meaning become visible. In this sense, Thoth's role as the scribe of the gods takes on new significance. He is not just recording the universe, he is organizing it. He represents the mental processes that categorize, label, sequence, interpret, and archive experience. Without these processes, the world would be an unstructured flow of sensory data. With them, the world gains shape. The lost teachings of Thoth, therefore, become lessons about how the mind structures reality, how knowledge is formed, and how clarity emerges from complexity. One of the most fascinating aspects of this interpretation is how it aligns with modern theories of predictive processing. In neuroscience, the brain is understood not as a passive receiver of information, but as an active prediction engine. It constantly anticipates what will happen next based on past patterns, adjusting its model when reality differs from prediction. This creates stability and efficiency. But it also means that much of what we see is actually expectation. The brain fills in gaps, corrects noise, simplifies input. Most of the world is filtered out, leaving only what is relevant for survival or attention. The ancients recognized this filtering process intuitively. They noticed that people often fail to see what is right in front of them. They noticed that rituals of focus, breath, and stillness allow deeper perception. They noticed that symbols bypass conscious filters and communicate directly with deeper layers of the mind. When they spoke of unlocking hidden dimensions, they were describing breakthroughs in perception, moments when the mind's predictive model relaxes enough to let new information in. Imagine an initiate being guided through a dark corridor in a temple. He is asked to breathe deeply, slow his steps, clear his mind. Torches flicker against the walls, creating shadows that shift with each movement. The elder speaks softly, telling him to watch not the shadows, but the spaces between them. At first, nothing changes. Then, slowly, he begins to notice subtle variations in the light patterns he had overlooked. His senses become sharper, not because anything mystical has happened, but because his cognitive filters have shifted. He is noticing data that his brain once ignored. This is the gateway to the so-called hidden dimension. Not a place, but a capacity, a state of mind where perception expands. Modern research calls this attentional training. It enhances sensory processing, strengthens neural connectivity, and reduces interference from irrelevant stimuli. The results can feel surreal. Colors appear brighter, sounds become more distinct, thoughts become clearer, time feels slower. None of this is supernatural. It's the brain operating at a different level of efficiency. The ancients described this as entering the halls of wisdom or the chambers of truth. The Emerald Code becomes a symbolic guide to achieving this clarity. It teaches that reality is layered, but those layers are accessed through perception, not through passageways in the physical world. In a way, the ancients were early cognitive scientists, mapping inner experience with metaphor and ritual. If we view the Emerald Code as a cognitive blueprint, we see that it aligns with several modern frameworks: neuroplasticity, predictive processing, pattern recognition, and attentional control. Each of these contributes to the brain's ability to shift perception and access more nuanced layers of reality. When ancient texts speak of mastering duality, they were referring to the balancing of rational and intuitive thought. When they speak of aligning the self with cosmic law, they were describing the synchronization of internal states, breath, emotion, focus with the external rhythms of nature. This scientific reframing doesn't diminish the beauty of the myth, it enhances it. It shows that ancient knowledge was not crude superstition, but sophisticated insight expressed through symbols designed to survive the erosion of time. And as we decode these symbols today, using the tools of modern science, we discover that the idea of hidden dimensions was never about distant galaxies or magical realms. It was about the dimension of mind, the invisible layers of perception that shape our lives from within. Part of what kept these teachings mysterious is that they were not meant to be understood intellectually alone. They were experiential. You had to practice the shifts in attention, the rituals of focus, the quieting of cognitive noise. Only then would new layers of perception reveal themselves. The Emerald Code was not something you read, it was something you enacted. When we examine the brain as a dynamic organ rather than a static machine, the significance of the Emerald Code becomes even more striking. Ancient descriptions of awakening, illumination, or vision can be understood as references to neural plasticity, the brain's ability to restructure itself in response to experience. Every breath, every moment of focused attention, every intentional movement creates micro-adjustments in neuronal circuits. The Egyptians understood this in practice, if not in the language we use today. Their methods were designed to optimize brain function, strengthen pathways that enhance perception, and diminish patterns that promote stagnation or limited awareness. Think of the mind as a landscape, constantly being shaped by experience. If left unattended, paths form only where habitual thought and reflex dominate. The majority of our decisions and perceptions are guided by well-worn mental tracks, making it difficult to see beyond immediate patterns. The ancient practices encoded in the Emerald Code function like a cognitive landscaping tool. They encourage the creation of new paths, rerouting the mind to notice subtleties, detect hidden patterns, and perceive connections that are otherwise invisible. In essence, these techniques expand the terrain of consciousness itself. Modern neuroscience supports this ancient insight. Studies on neuroplasticity show that even brief periods of intentional focus or mindfulness can alter the density and connectivity of neural networks. Brain regions associated with attention, sensory processing, emotional regulation, and memory exhibit measurable growth when stimulated through targeted practices. What the Egyptians described as unlocking hidden dimensions is, in practical terms, the deliberate restructuring of these neural networks to enhance perception and understanding. Consider attention as the gatekeeper to perception. Without sustained attention, the brain filters out most stimuli as irrelevant. But when attention is trained, the filtering process becomes more selective, allowing meaningful patterns to emerge from apparent chaos. This is why the ancient teachings emphasized both stillness and engagement moments of quiet reflection and deliberate action. One without the other creates imbalance. Too much stillness without application can result in passive awareness, while action without reflection leads to repetitive cycles that fail to penetrate deeper truths. The code, in this sense, prescribes a rhythm of alternation between observation, meditation, and activity that optimizes cognitive development. Moreover, the body itself is central to this process. Physical posture, movement, and breathing directly influence brain function. Proper spinal alignment enhances cerebrospinal fluid flow, which in turn nourishes neural tissue and facilitates the transmission of signals between the body and brain. Deep, rhythmic breathing regulates oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, affecting neurotransmitter balance and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. This is not speculative. Modern physiology confirms that breath and movement modulate brain activity and emotional state. The Egyptians encoded this wisdom into rituals, yoga-like postures, and breathwork. Each practice was a calibration of mind and body to align with internal and external rhythms. The Emerald Code also emphasizes the role of sensory input in shaping perception. Temples, symbols, sounds, and rituals were not merely aesthetic, they were cognitive tools. Hieroglyphs were designed to convey information visually while triggering associative thought patterns. Sounds and chants affected brainwave activity, promoting states conducive to insight and focus. Even the architectural design of temples, light entering through narrow shafts at precise angles, corridors that created movement sequences, was intended to guide attention and sharpen perception. These were early forms of environmental neuroengineering, shaping the mind through controlled exposure to sensory stimuli. When you apply this knowledge today, the principles remain the same even if the medium differs. Environmental cues, structured routines, focused attention, and body-centered practices all serve as scaffolds for cognitive growth. By intentionally creating conditions that stimulate attention, flexibility, and sensory integration, we can replicate the functional outcomes described by Thoth's Code: expanded perception, deeper awareness, and access to subtle layers of experience. Now, consider the concept of resonance, a recurring theme in the Emerald Code. Resonance describes the idea that all systems, physical, mental, and energetic, operate optimally when aligned with their natural frequency. In modern terms, this can be understood through oscillatory brain activity. Neurons fire in rhythmic patterns, producing waves that correlate with different mental states. Delta waves for deep sleep, theta for creativity and insight, alpha for relaxed focus, beta for alert, problem-solving, and gamma for high-level integration. When the brain's oscillations are coherent and harmonized, cognitive performance improves, emotional regulation stabilizes, and perception deepens. The Egyptians understood resonance intuitively. Through sound, movement, and breath, they encouraged internal coherence, creating the conditions for insight and expanded awareness. Meditation, in particular, plays a key role in this resonance. By focusing attention, slowing breath, and calming movement, the practitioner fosters synchronization between different regions of the brain. Modern neuroimaging shows that meditation enhances functional connectivity, particularly between prefrontal cortex areas responsible for executive function and deeper structures like the hippocampus and amygdala. This mirrors the ancient description of aligning mind, body, and spirit to perceive hidden truths. Meditation is not merely relaxation. It is active training of the nervous system to access higher-order cognition and latent capacities. Another critical component of the code is the integration of dual aspects of perception, the rational and the intuitive. Rational cognition allows for analytical problem-solving and structured reasoning, while intuitive cognition detects patterns, anticipates outcomes, and synthesizes disparate information. The ancient texts describe this as balancing solar and lunar forces, masculine and feminine energies, or mind and heart. From a modern perspective, these dualities correspond to the interplay between cortical, rational, and subcortical, intuitive, processing, conscious and unconscious integration, logic, and instinct. Mastery of both allows one to navigate complex realities with flexibility and insight. The process of accessing hidden dimensions also involves expanding temporal awareness. Time, as experienced subjectively, is elastic and deeply influenced by cognitive state. Flow states, deep focus, and contemplative practices can alter the perception of time, making moments feel elongated or timeless. The ancients referred to this as transcending linearity, experiencing the eternal moment, or synchronizing with cosmic cycles. Neuroscience confirms that temporal perception is constructed by the brain and modulated by attention, novelty, and emotional engagement. When the mind is fully present, neural circuits encode experiences more densely, making time feel richer. This subjective manipulation of temporal experience is another aspect of accessing hidden dimensions. The realization that internal perception governs the experience of reality. One of the most transformative insights of the Emerald Code is that hidden dimensions are accessible to everyone, but only through intentional practice. The texts caution against casual engagement. Insight is not a commodity, but an emergent property of disciplined attention, bodily alignment, and cognitive refinement. This principle aligns with modern research on deliberate practice. Expertise and insight are not products of innate talent alone, but of sustained, focused, structured effort. The ancients encoded these instructions into myths, rituals, and symbolic frameworks to protect the integrity of the practice while guiding those ready to commit. Furthermore, the code emphasizes the interplay between self and environment. The initiate learns that perception is not solely an internal process. External patterns, natural cycles, and environmental rhythms interact with cognitive and energetic states. Observing the motion of celestial bodies, the flow of rivers, the growth of plants, all were part of training perception. These practices refined attention, enhanced pattern recognition, and deepened understanding of interconnections. Modern ecological psychology confirms that interaction with complex, natural environments enhances cognitive flexibility, problem-solving, and emotional regulation. Thoth's teachings anticipated these findings by millennia. Finally, the hidden dimensions revealed by the Emerald Code are not distant or separate from ordinary experience. They are embedded in daily life, waiting to be perceived. What changes is the sensitivity and refinement of the observer. Once cognitive filters are expanded, bodily resonance optimized, attention trained, and dual aspects of perception integrated, one begins to notice subtle layers, micro-patterns in social interactions, intricate structures in nature, recurring motifs in thought, and connections between seemingly unrelated events. These hidden dimensions are the deep fabric of reality, the underlying patterns that the ancients encoded into their teachings as the Emerald Code. In practical terms, the code can be applied in modern life through consistent practice. Mindful attention, rhythmic breathing, intentional movement, contemplative silence, and sensory calibration. Each practice contributes to neural coherence, cognitive flexibility, and expanded perception. The outcome is a mind capable of perceiving hidden layers of reality, a body aligned with internal rhythms, and an awareness that transcends habitual limitations. This is the real unlocking described by Thoth, the conscious activation of latent capacities that reveal the deeper architecture of existence. By understanding the Emerald Code in this way, we recognize that its greatest power was never in esoteric knowledge for the few, but in training, perception, and cognition for the many. Hidden dimensions are accessible, measurable, and practical. They are revealed not through external magic, but through the disciplined cultivation of attention, body, and mind. And as we begin to practice these principles, the boundary between ordinary and extraordinary perception dissolves. Reality itself becomes richer, more vivid, and deeply interconnected. The implications are profound. When perception is refined, the mind notices opportunities, patterns, and solutions that were previously invisible. Relationships become clearer, problem-solving more effective, and creativity more abundant. Emotional regulation improves because subtle cues are no longer missed, reducing reactive patterns. Health and well-being are enhanced as body and mind are synchronized, promoting optimal function. In short, accessing hidden dimensions is not a fantastical ability reserved for mystics. It is a natural outcome of optimized cognition, perception, and alignment with the underlying patterns of reality. As we move beyond individual perception, the Emerald Code begins to reveal its broader applications. Hidden dimensions are not merely personal insights. They exist as networks, resonances, and patterns that connect consciousness across individuals, communities, and even civilizations. The Egyptians recognized this long ago, encoding their knowledge into communal rituals, temple designs, and hierarchical training systems. The flow of information, energy, and awareness was never meant to remain confined to a single practitioner. It was designed to propagate, to ripple outward, and influence collective experience. Consider resonance at the collective level. Just as individual neural circuits can synchronize to create coherence, groups of people can attune to shared frequencies through aligned intention, coordinated breath, movement, and attention. Temples, processions, and ceremonial dances were not theatrical. They were tools of collective coherence, activating networks of cognition that amplified insight across the community. Modern studies of group meditation, synchronized movement, and even musical performance confirm similar phenomena. When individuals align rhythmically in breath, motion, or focus, heart rates, brain waves, and emotional states become entrained. The ancients describe this as the harmonization of the soul of the community, creating an energetic field that transcended the individual. This collective resonance has profound implications. When a group of individuals is operating at peak coherence, information can flow more efficiently through social networks, creative solutions emerge faster, and the group can access patterns and insights unavailable to any one member alone. The Emerald Code anticipates modern network theory. Complex systems function optimally when components are not only individually competent but interconnected in a synchronized dynamic flow. It is no coincidence that ancient civilizations with sophisticated understanding of biology, astronomy, architecture, and social governance developed elaborate communal practices. These practices were cognitive scaffolds, designed to amplify the collective intelligence of society. But there is a catch. Just as stagnation blocks individual perception, misalignment at the group level disrupts collective resonance. Division, distraction, stress, and habitual reactive patterns interfere with the natural flow of information. Societies that fail to cultivate coherence experience systemic dysfunction, information bottlenecks, social conflict, reduced creativity, and poor adaptation to environmental pressures. In modern times, we see this reflected in the constant barrage of fragmented media, hypercompetition, and societal stressors that fragment collective focus. The ancient methods preserved in the Emerald Code were designed as countermeasures tools to restore alignment, to re-establish pathways for shared awareness and collaborative intelligence. To engage this level of collective cognition, the practitioner must first achieve mastery at the individual level. One cannot synchronize with others without a baseline coherence within the self. Breath, movement, attention, and perceptual refinement are foundational. Once internal resonance is established, external alignment becomes possible. Participating in group rituals, coordinated breathing sessions, or intentional movement exercises multiplies the effect, creating a field of awareness that amplifies insight and capacity beyond the sum of its parts. This principle was central to the Egyptian understanding of sacred geometry, temple layout, and ceremonial sequencing. The environment, the individual, and the group were all integrated into a single system of resonance. From here, the Emerald Code guides the practitioner into what might be called dimensional perception, the ability to detect subtle layers of reality that exist simultaneously with the ordinary. These layers are not merely metaphorical. They represent information encoded in light, vibration, pattern, and relational structure. By training attention, regulating bodily resonance, and cultivating mental flexibility, the practitioner becomes sensitive to these layers. Ancient texts describe this as perceiving the currents of life, the threads of destiny, or the hidden structure of reality. Modern physics, particularly quantum theory, begins to describe reality in similar terms, as interconnected fields of information, probability waves, and energetic resonance. The parallels are striking. The code provides methods to consciously interface with these subtle structures, expanding perception in ways that were once dismissed as mystical. At a practical level, dimensional perception manifests as heightened intuition, rapid pattern recognition, enhanced creativity, and anticipatory awareness. Practitioners report noticing patterns in social dynamics, environmental shifts, and even their own internal states with remarkable clarity. Decisions become informed by layers of information that previously went unnoticed. In essence, the mind is trained to read the hidden dimensions that underlie ordinary experience, converting what appears to be random noise into meaningful signals. This is precisely what the Egyptians encoded, a systematic method for perceiving reality beyond its surface appearance. The code also highlights the ethical weight that accompanies expanded perception. To recognize subtle patterns is to accept responsibility for how that insight is used. Like a river that can either nourish life or erode what surrounds it, heightened awareness and influence have the power to stabilize or unsettle the systems with which one is connected. Ancient teachings cautioned that applying such practices for personal advantage, manipulation, or coercion disrupts harmony in both the individual and the wider collective. Genuine mastery arises from aligning one's inner dynamics with the deeper structure of reality, what they referred to as Ma'at. Ma'at embodies balance, harmony, and justice across all layers of existence, from the cellular to the societal. It serves as the unseen architecture that upholds coherence and guides perception and action toward beneficial ends. Integrating the Emerald Code into modern life requires deliberate adaptation. While the principles remain constant, the environment, technology, and social context have changed drastically. Digital overload, sedentary lifestyles, and fragmented attention challenge the practitioner in new ways. Yet these challenges are precisely why the code is more relevant than ever. By intentionally engaging the practices of breath, movement, attention, and environmental attunement, we counteract the disruptive forces of contemporary living. The same principles that allowed Egyptian priests to access hidden dimensions can be applied today to navigate modern complexity with clarity, resilience, and expanded perception. For example, consider the modern workplace. The constant barrage of notifications, fragmented tasks, and competing priorities creates cognitive chaos. Applying the Emerald Code might involve structured micro-practices, breath exercises between meetings to reset internal resonance, moments of intentional silence to enhance cognitive clarity, movement sequences to release tension and maintain circulation, and mindfulness practices to strengthen pattern recognition. Individually, these practices enhance personal performance. Collectively, when integrated across teams or communities, they create a coherent field of awareness that multiplies problem-solving ability, innovation, and emotional stability. Another practical application lies in creative work. Artists, writers, engineers, and scientists all depend on the ability to perceive patterns, synthesize information, and anticipate outcomes. The code's emphasis on dimensional awareness trains the mind to detect subtle signals in the environment, internal states, and relationships between ideas. By cultivating rhythm, coherence, and focused attention, the practitioner increases the bandwidth of perception, accessing layers of insight that remain invisible to conventional thinking. The process is iterative. Practice expands perception. Perception informs action. Action produces feedback, and feedback further refines perception. This loop mirrors the ancient cycles of learning and observation described in the Emerald Code. Finally, the code encourages integration with natural rhythms. Circadian cycles, lunar phases, seasonal transitions, and planetary movements are all described as frameworks for timing, practice, and perception. While ancient texts framed these cycles mythologically, the underlying principle is physiological and cognitive. Aligning with environmental rhythms enhances internal resonance, synchronizes neural activity, and improves adaptive response. Modern chronobiology confirms that alignment with natural cycles optimizes sleep, hormonal balance, cognitive performance, and emotional regulation. The Egyptians encoded these cycles into ceremonial timing, daily routines, and ritual observances to maximize the efficacy of their practices. In conclusion, the Emerald Code offers a comprehensive framework for expanding human perception, enhancing cognitive function, and accessing hidden dimensions of reality. Its methods integrate breath, movement, attention, and environmental attunement to cultivate internal and collective coherence. It teaches that perception is not passive but active, and that the boundaries of reality are directly influenced by the alignment of mind, body, and environment. The code emphasizes both the potential and responsibility inherent in expanded awareness, guiding practitioners to navigate subtle layers of reality ethically and effectively. The implications are transformative. By practicing these principles, individuals can enhance intuition, problem-solving, creativity, and emotional regulation. Groups can achieve collective coherence, amplifying insight and collaborative capacity. Societies can restore alignment, resilience, and adaptability in the face of complexity. Hidden dimensions, once the domain of mystics and initiates, become accessible through disciplined practice, revealing a reality rich with patterns, connections, and opportunities previously unseen. And this is only the beginning. The next phase of understanding the Emerald Code involves integrating these practices into daily life consistently, transforming them from techniques into habitual modes of being. The journey from individual mastery to collective resonance and dimensional perception is gradual but measurable, providing concrete feedback through cognitive clarity, emotional stability, physical vitality, and perceptual expansion. By honoring these ancient principles, we not only reconnect with the wisdom of our ancestors, but also unlock capacities within ourselves and our communities that redefine the limits of human potential. Once you've established coherence within yourself and begun to perceive the hidden dimensions, the Emerald Code guides the practitioner toward mastery over time itself. This is not a metaphorical time, nor a subjective perception of hours passing. It is biological time, the tempo at which cells, tissues, and systems operate, and how they respond to internal and external stimuli. The Egyptians, through their meticulous observation, Recognize that life unfolds along patterns that can be influenced, accelerated, or reversed depending on alignment with natural law. They encoded these insights not as mystical allegory, but as practical instructions for maintaining vitality, clarity, and resilience across decades. The first principle in this mastery is the recognition that energy, not matter, is the primary medium through which life is experienced and transformed. Matter, the physical body, is a container. Energy, the flow of consciousness, breath, and motion, is what animates and sustains it. When energy flows unobstructed, biological processes function optimally. Circulation, detoxification, neural activity, and cellular repair all operate in harmony. When energy stagnates, even abundant nutrition, supplementation, or exercise cannot fully compensate. This principle lies at the heart of the Emerald Code. The human body is a system of currents, rhythms, and feedback loops, and understanding these currents is the key to controlling biological and perceptual time. Breath remains the primary tool for influencing this flow, but in Section 3, we explore its application beyond individual vitality into what the Egyptians called time acceleration through resonance. When breath, attention, and movement are synchronized, they create internal oscillations that signal to the body that resources are abundant and repair mechanisms can operate at peak efficiency. Research into heart rate variability, neurocardiology, and psychophysiology confirms that controlled breathing patterns, especially those that combine slow inhalation, extended retention, and deliberate exhalation, create measurable shifts in autonomic nervous system activity. Cortisol decreases, growth hormone increases, and cellular repair accelerates. The ancients encoded these principles in sequences that combined diaphragmatic breath with postural alignment and mental focus, ensuring maximum energetic resonance. The second principle is pattern recognition. To navigate hidden dimensions, one must develop the ability to detect the underlying structures that govern observable phenomena. This involves not only heightened sensory perception, but the cultivation of intuitive faculties. The Egyptians trained their apprentices in detailed observation of natural cycles, plant growth, animal behavior, astronomical movements, and environmental shifts. They learned to read patterns in these systems and extrapolate insights about unseen forces. Modern cognitive science describes similar processes as predictive coding, where the brain continuously identifies statistical regularities in sensory input to anticipate future events. The code teaches that mastery of perception allows one to anticipate, adapt, and act with precision, turning uncertainty into opportunity. The third principle is integration. The unification of inner coherence, perceptual clarity, and external influence. The Emerald Code emphasizes that no single skill suffices. Breath without attention is mechanical. Attention without alignment produces mental strain. Alignment without movement creates stagnation. Only by integrating these elements into a dynamic whole can the practitioner engage with hidden dimensions fully. This integration is not abstract. It produces measurable changes in physiology, cognition, and emotional state. Brain scans of experienced meditators and breathwork practitioners reveal increased connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and autonomic networks, demonstrating that integrated practice rewires the nervous system for resilience, perception, and expanded awareness. As mastery develops, practitioners begin to experience what the Egyptians called temporal fluidity. Ordinary experience treats time as linear. One moment follows another, relentlessly. But in advanced practice, time is perceived as malleable, responsive to internal state. Moments can expand, allowing full immersion, learning, and regeneration. Moments can contract, enabling rapid adaptation and insight. This is not subjective illusion, it is a biological effect. Attention, emotional regulation, and energetic alignment directly influence circadian rhythms, metabolic processes, and cellular repair rates. By consciously managing these variables, one can optimize recovery, performance, and cognitive efficiency, effectively bending time in one's favor. A key aspect of temporal fluidity is intentional delay and retention. The Egyptians described this as the practice of holding vital energy within the body to extend its functional impact. Modern science demonstrates that deliberate pauses in activity, breath, or thought, such as controlled retention in breathing, mindful stillness, or focused visualization enhance autonomic flexibility, improve oxygen utilization, and stimulate mitochondrial efficiency. Cells interpret these patterns as signals that the organism is safe, resourced, and prepared for regeneration. In other words, slowing down consciously accelerates biological function. Movement remains central to this phase of mastery. But the movement is no longer purely physical, it is energetic and intentional. Every posture, rotation, and undulation acts as a conduit for information transfer across the body's biofield. The Egyptians referred to this as harmonizing the serpentine currents, echoing imagery of the Kundalini, or serpent of life force. Contemporary biofield studies, fascia research, and somatic neuroscience confirm that intentional movement transmits mechanical and electrical signals that synchronize neural, muscular, and circulatory systems. The Emerald Code sequences are designed to activate these channels systematically, creating a state where the body supports perception, cognition, and regeneration simultaneously. The fourth principle is environmental attunement. The ancients understood that consciousness does not exist in isolation. It is a relational phenomenon, responsive to light, sound, electromagnetic fields, and subtle energetic currents in the environment. Temple alignment, astronomical observation, and ritual timing were not symbolic. They were precise calibrations designed to enhance the body's energetic resonance. Modern chronobiology, light therapy research, and psychophysiology provide empirical support. Exposure to natural light cycles, sound frequencies, and geomagnetic fields influences hormonal regulation, circadian rhythms, and cognitive performance. By recreating these conditions in daily life, practitioners amplify the effects of the Emerald Code, allowing hidden dimensions to become more perceptible and actionable. Ethical responsibility continues to be a guiding factor. As perception and influence expand, so does the potential impact on others. The code emphasizes that mastery is not domination. It is alignment with natural law, enabling flow rather than coercion. Actions guided by insight should harmonize systems rather than disrupt them. In practice, this means using enhanced perception to support collaboration, problem-solving, and healing, rather than manipulation or control. In this way, advanced practitioners become stewards of both personal and collective well-being, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond individual experience. Finally, mastery culminates in what the Egyptians called dimensional integration, the ability to operate simultaneously across multiple layers of reality. This does not mean abandoning the material world, it means perceiving its subtle structures, patterns, and energetic undercurrents while fully engaged in ordinary life. Practitioners navigate business, relationships, and creative projects with enhanced insight, anticipating challenges, seizing opportunities, and maintaining equilibrium under stress. This duality presence in both ordinary and hidden dimensions is the ultimate expression of the Emerald Code, and it reflects the highest level of human potential encoded in the ancient texts. As dimensional integration becomes habitual, the practitioner begins to perceive that what we call reality is a fluid construct, dependent not only on external circumstances, but on internal coherence. Thoughts, emotions, and bodily states ripple outward, subtly influencing the environment and others around us. The Egyptians observed this principle in daily life. Priests who maintained alignment with the Emerald Code were said to bring harmony, clarity, and even prosperity to the communities they served. Modern studies in psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics confirm that coherent mental and emotional states improve immune function, accelerate healing, and even influence gene expression. Consciousness is not confined to the brain, it interacts with all levels of biological, environmental, and social systems. The next stage of practice involves the cultivation of what the Egyptians called the silent witness. This is a state of heightened awareness, where the practitioner observes thoughts and sensations without attachment or judgment. It is not meditation as popularly taught. It is a deliberate alignment of perception, energy, and intention. Neuroscience describes this as enhanced metacognitive awareness and default mode network regulation. By cultivating the silent witness, you gain the ability to navigate mental and emotional turbulence without triggering stress responses. Cellular repair accelerates, neural networks reorganize, and time itself begins to bend, not metaphorically, but physiologically, as your body interprets safety, coherence, and abundance. Advanced practitioners also engage in what the texts describe as energetic reciprocity. This is the understanding that every interaction, whether physical, verbal, or mental, creates a feedback loop. When actions are grounded in awareness, compassion, and clarity, they generate positive energetic currents that reinforce internal coherence and enhance regenerative processes. Conversely, reactive, chaotic behavior disrupts internal and external harmony, slowing cellular repair, increasing inflammation, and distorting perception. The Emerald Code emphasizes that mastery is inseparable from responsibility. To influence hidden dimensions without ethical grounding is to invite imbalance. Breath, movement, and attention converge in what the Egyptians described as the triad of dimensional resonance. Advanced sequences synchronize the diaphragm, spine, and cognitive focus into oscillations that ripple through the nervous system, fascia, and biofield. Practitioners experience heightened clarity, expanded perception, and accelerated regeneration. Research into polyvagal theory, somatic resonance, and quantum biology indicates that such synchronized oscillations reduce inflammation, optimize heart rate variability, and enhance neuroplasticity. Every cell receives a signal. Abundance is present. Repair is prioritized. Energy flows freely. This triad forms the core mechanism by which hidden dimensions are accessed, and time becomes responsive. Visualization and intention amplify these effects. The Egyptians instructed their initiates to engage the imagination with precision. Not idle fantasy, but structured mental imagery designed to align internal and external patterns. Visualizing energy pathways, channels, and circuits while simultaneously maintaining breath and spinal alignment generates measurable physiological and neurological changes. Blood oxygenation improves, neural connectivity strengthens, and the fascia, a network of connective tissue, responds to mental cues, transmitting subtle forces across the body. This practice transforms perception, allowing practitioners to detect micro-patterns in physical, social, and energetic domains. A remarkable aspect of the Emerald Code is the fluidity with which these practices scale. Beginners begin with simple breath sequences and gentle movement. Advanced practitioners layer visualization, attention modulation, and environmental attunement. Each stage reinforces the previous, creating a spiral of refinement where mastery emerges organically rather than through forced effort. Consistency becomes the silent architect of transformation. The Egyptians, through careful observation of apprentices, recognized that incremental, disciplined engagement produced far more enduring results than sporadic displays of intensity. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Sustained, moderate practice rewires neural networks more effectively than infrequent extremes. One of the most profound outcomes of the Emerald Code is the transformation of perception itself. Ordinary experience is filtered through habitual patterns, emotional biases, and conditioned attention. As mastery deepens, these filters dissolve. Time slows, space expands, and ordinary interactions reveal layers of complexity previously unnoticed. Biological aging decelerates as stress hormones normalize, repair mechanisms operate optimally, and energy flows unobstructed through tissues and organs. Your body is no longer a machine fighting entropy. It is a self-regulating system, capable of maintaining youth, vitality, and clarity indefinitely, so long as alignment is preserved. The final dimension of mastery involves what the texts call harmonic projection. This is the ability to extend coherent energy into the environment, influencing events and individuals through resonance rather than force. Harmonic projection is not manipulation, it is the natural consequence of internal coherence. When you are fully aligned in breath, movement, and attention, your energetic signature subtly shapes interactions, facilitating clarity, empathy, and constructive outcomes. Modern physics and consciousness research suggests that subtle energetic emissions influence electromagnetic, acoustic, and biofield environments, validating what the ancients encoded symbolically as resonance with the cosmic order. By now, it should be clear that the Emerald Code is neither mystical fantasy nor purely philosophical speculation. It is practical, repeatable, and verifiable. The techniques are accessible to anyone, regardless of age, physical condition, or prior experience. The effects manifest incrementally at first: slightly deeper breathing, more stable attention, subtle bodily ease, but compound over time, creating transformative shifts in health, perception, and consciousness. As you persist in the triad of breath, silence, and movement, the river of life force flows freely, the body repairs itself, and the mind navigates reality with precision. Now, imagine beginning each day with a 5-minute ritual. Conscious, diaphragmatic breathing that oxygenates every cell, deliberate movement that awakens spinal and organ circulation, and focused attention that cultivates silence, awareness, and energetic clarity. Over weeks, your energy stabilizes, your mind sharpens, and your body begins to recover from years of accumulated stagnation. By months, the benefits compound: deep tissue repair, neural rewiring, improved resilience, and subtle shifts in perception and timing. Years down the line, the effects are unmistakable. Vitality persists, mental clarity endures, and your relationship with time itself transforms. What if everything you've been taught about aging, stress, and limitation is wrong? What if your body, mind, and consciousness are capable of regeneration, expansion, and temporal mastery if only you reclaim the forgotten practices hidden for millennia? This is the promise of Thoth's Lost Emerald Code, a direct pathway to the hidden dimensions encoded within your own biology and consciousness. Every choice, every breath, every moment of stillness or movement contributes to your alignment with these hidden dimensions. This is not a promise of fantasy or instant gratification. It is the patient, consistent unfolding of potential already inherent within you. As you engage, the boundary between ordinary and hidden dimensions blurs. You begin to perceive patterns, anticipate outcomes, and influence circumstances with subtlety and precision. Cellular repair accelerates, the nervous system stabilizes, and consciousness itself expands. This is your opportunity to step fully into the mastery encoded by Thoth, the synthesis of ancient observation and modern science. Every breath, every intentional pause, every movement in fluid alignment is a declaration. You will no longer be a passive participant in the passage of time. You will influence it, you will align with it, and you will harness it to sustain vitality, awareness, and energetic coherence. This is not theoretical. It is verifiable, measurable, and repeatable. The only variable is your commitment. Your path forward is clear. Begin now. Commit 5 minutes each day to conscious breathing, intentional silence, and fluid spine-centered movement. Document your experience. Observe changes in energy, clarity, and vitality, and expand these practices gradually. Recognize that the Emerald Code is not a set of secrets hidden from you. It is a framework for reclaiming the knowledge your body already contains. The river of life within you waits patiently. The moment to release the dam is now. Begin your daily practice immediately. Commit to consistency over intensity. Share your experiences with others who seek transformation, creating a network of practitioners who remember the principles that were almost lost to time. Align your body, mind, and consciousness with the flow of natural law, and allow the Emerald Code to reveal the hidden dimensions that await you. By doing so, you reclaim sovereignty over your vitality, perception, and relationship with time itself. The journey has begun. The dimensions are waiting, and your body, mind, and consciousness already contain the keys. Step forward, breathe deeply, move fluidly, and witness the unfolding of hidden reality within and around you.